It's been a few months, eh? Let's talk. Of course, the biggest obstacle, well, in fact, I think this is one of the reasons I started a podcast, or simply to tell them they suck.
Because most of the students, they don't know beyond teacher.
I think it somehow gives me a wider perspective of what the job as a flight attendant looks like. It goes like this: have patience for results and impatience for actions.
Maybe a lot of times.
These two elements are enough to help guide your fitness journey, I would say.
I just live with the concept like you eat to live or you live to live.
Footwear, specifically reusable footwear business.
I don't want written how?
In the second part, or the second lesson that I take away from all these is, for this recap, I want to do it this way. I want to go through some of the highlights or some of the interesting episodes, some of the interesting conversations that I had with some of my guests. I won't be going through all each of the episode. I think that's going to be a little bit more boring if I do that. Let's break down some of the more interesting episodes, more interesting conversations, and let's see what we can learn over here. So first off, we have Sham, a colleague of mine. Super grateful that he agreed to do this with me on the podcast. So the idea behind inviting Sham onto the podcast was that I like his story. I like how he handled obstacles in life. Basically, he came all the way from India, and before that, of course, the biggest obstacle in his life was that he couldn't find a job, and he knew he was broke. In fact, he was only down with $100 in his bank account, and it's unimaginable what he would do. I would give you 10 seconds to think to guess what he did. I hope I won't need to do this, but just so you know, he basically gave some money to his family and friends and told them to leave him for 6 months. And in that 6 months, he tried all his best to level up his coding skills. And now I think he's one of the best engineers out there that I know. And he said it best when he mentioned that even if there's no opportunity for him out there, he would create his own. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about handling life itself. It's never about the ups, it's more about how we bounce back up when we fail. Then we had in the second episode, we had Faye, who was new friend at that time. If you told me that I would be having such a guest with such a caliber in my second episode, my second conversation for the Decode Diary, I wouldn't believe you. In fact, we talked about women, we talked about homosexuality, which I didn't know about. I didn't have a lot of knowledge about this topic, and if you look back at the conversation, if you listen to it, there was a lot of pauses, a lot of thinking. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say. But the point is, I like the conversation a lot. I like the fact that I challenged myself, trying to go into conversations like this. When in fact, I think this is one of the reasons I started a podcast. I try to be brutally honest with myself, even though I'm not familiar with these kind of things. And I think in today's society, what Faye has done, which is basically she came out, and I think it's a commendable action when we try to stand up for ourselves, when we try to live the life that we want to live. And the only way that we can do that is by saying that this is how I want to do it, this is how I want to live my life. And by being brutally honest with yourself, that's the only way to do it. If you're cheating, if you're lying to yourself, I don't think there's going to be a second that you would enjoy the rest of your life. It's going to be really painful. And so yeah, I think the main point from the second episode is honesty. It's all about honesty, and I like that a lot. I think I was truly finding myself in that conversation. I was truly thinking how I want to live my life after that conversation. It's mind-blowing. I want to fast forward to episode 5, I think. It was with Johnny, a new friend at the time as well. But the point that I want to bring across here is that in that conversation, he brought up to me about mindfulness. Something I barely touched on, but nevertheless, I think mindfulness is something that I've been subconsciously practicing because, like I said, I've always tried to be brutally honest with myself, which means that I go over my emotions, I try to analyze them, I try to think why I'm feeling this way at this certain moment in life. And we gave an example. Think about this one. So let's say you're asleep at 3 a.m. in the morning. You got woken up by the sound of a dog barking outside your house, and you get annoyed, you get irritated, you get angry, you wake up, and then you can't fall back asleep. And if you practice mindfulness, if you're being mindful of the emotions, of your feelings, you basically, sure, I mean, you will get woken up by the dog, but the next thing you would do is, of course, you start breathing. You would notice that the dog outside is barking because of some reasons, maybe because of some strangers. You would think, basically you would stop thinking, but you would stop observing within and also externally. By observing yourself, by observing what is happening, you stop the process of thinking. And that's when mindfulness steps in. When you stop thinking, when you start observing, you are describing what's happening. But I think the simple act of observing and noticing what you're going through right now is already the simple practice of mindfulness. I think it goes a long way to ensuring that you are calm, you are understanding yourself. And the fact is, I wasn't like this before. I used to distract myself. I used to shy away from talking about things like this, sensitive things and things about my emotions, my feelings. But I think over the years I've come to learn that being able to observe what you're feeling can already, for the most part, solve most of your problems. For example, when you're feeling down today, you're probably thinking of the late night yesterday, or maybe the sales that you didn't close last week. That's probably why you're feeling so sad, why you're feeling so grumpy about yourself. But come to think of it, the point that you're feeling this way means that you can somehow do something about it. And for sure, you can continue feeling that way and not do anything. But of course, the other side of the problem is that you can start taking actions, you can start doing something to counter that emotion, to counter that feeling. Let me know down in the comments what you feel, what you think of mindfulness, or how you actually practice it. I think there's a lot of things that I'm not doing right if it comes to proper practice, but I'm sure at this point it's really more about emotions and feelings and taking control over them. And 2 conversations later, I had this conversation with Dr. Bruce about our dental and oral care. It's a topic that most people would brush off, simply because this is one of the things that we do every morning, and it's so subtle and trivial that it doesn't matter, right? But I think the reason we started the conversation about dental and oral care is because people don't care too much these days. And if you think about it, it's something that we miss, or it's something that we sometimes don't care, that we don't even do. For example, let's say we're on a night out, and when we get home we're drunk, we don't brush our teeth. And think of all the little details that we miss out in our life. People preach about this on social media, that we have to focus on the little details if we want to achieve greatness, if we want to achieve success. And one of these things, I think, is brushing and taking care of our teeth. Think of making your bed in the morning right after you wake up. I think that's one of the subtle details that you have to focus on. It goes a long way in terms of the effects, and until it's too late that we don't realize the pain or the damage that we have done to our teeth. And fun fact, I'm not sure if you know this already, if we don't take care of our teeth, basically bad teeth can lead to heart diseases. Think of the impact, think of the effect. I can't stress this already. And trust me, after that conversation, I started flossing, I started brushing my teeth correctly. I started focusing on my dental and oral care. And it's not just about the teeth, it includes your tongue as well. How many of you actually scrape your tongue? Think of all the gunk sitting at the back of your mouth. I mean, it disgusts me right now thinking of it, but before the conversation, I never gave a thought about this. And thanks to Dr. Bruce. I think if you want to learn more about taking care of your teeth, the correct techniques, I think you should listen to that conversation. Go check out the episode. In this next episode, I had this conversation with my friend from high school. He was in the basketball team. We played basketball a lot together during high school, and well, in fact, he was the team leader in a school basketball team. But the entire conversation surrounded this topic of him trying to build a business of his own. He ran his own cafe. Yeah, come to think of it, I was just really racing back against my memories, trying to think what he was like in person. And to think of it this way, he was the kind of leader who was selfless, you know. And also he was a professional gamer, still is, I think. And I like the way he approaches team building, he approaches teamwork. The story that he told me that I find interesting was that how he took care of his kitchen members during time of COVID. That shows a lot of leadership when you know you're only taking home $2,000 a month when times are hard and you can only feed so many people, and you choose to sacrifice yourself for the sake of the business. I think it's really selfless. I think you know your priorities right when you do this kind of thing. And as a leader, you can also see how he delegates the responsibilities and isolate problems from the kitchen, so that the kitchen can continue running, the business can continue running on its own. Also, another thing that I took away from that conversation was the attention to details part of him. I think as a business owner, you sometimes have to be a perfectionist. By being a perfectionist, you pay a lot of attention to details, and these details are the things that make or break your business. In fact, one of the examples that he gave was how of course he can cook, but he would prefer, or he would rather stay at the customer side, just so he could see, just so he could observe how his customers are behaving or feeling, so he could attend to those problems. I think this is one of the first conversations that I had about business, and it taught me so much about handling people. It taught me so much about handling problems. And of course, one of the first things you have to do is to fix your own attitude, to fix your own mindset on how you approach things. The way Junwei handles all these things, I'm just surprised, because when he was in high school, he was in the basketball team. I don't think we've ever come to the point that we would expect this from him, running a cafe business, running a team with him. But I'm so proud of him right now. In his next conversation, I had a deep talk with Melissa. Before that, I have a question for you. Have you ever tried or thought of quitting your job just so you could find answers to some of your questions? Or should I rephrase this question? Have you ever thought of quitting a job not to pursue your other career goals, not to start a side business, but to actually do some reflections in life? And Melissa did that actually. I was really shocked when she told me this, that she had quit a job and she did a solo travel to Japan, all in the name of doing reflections in her life. Well, I sort of understand her after that. I sort of can see why she did that and she made the decision. To her, I think it's more about releasing herself from the expectations or the eyes of the society. In simple terms, I think it's more about acceptance of yourself. It's more about accepting yourself, accepting your flaws, accepting who you are. I think most adults today would actually ignore this part, because I think the acceptance of others would grant them more success or more reassurance, more happiness sometimes. But to me, I think there needs to be a balance. You need to strike a balance between satisfying the expectation of others, for example, your family, your friends, your close ones, your loved ones, and also the expectations of yourself. You need to live up to a standard, to a certain point where you think, right, I think this is my life, I think I'm doing great, I think I've made it. And I think Melissa said it best when she mentioned this example of her doing her solo travel in Japan, where this old couple who hosted her was showing compassion for her, taking really great care of her during the travel. And I think at that point, the mere happiness was just that she found kindness in people. I think a lot of times when we talk about acceptance from others, it's mostly how people treat each other. It's mostly how people want to appear better, stronger, richer than anyone else. And in doing so, we unknowingly hurt someone else. And I think from Melissa's point of view, she found herself. She found the right thing. She found kindness in people, most importantly. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. And maybe the biggest takeaway, or if there's something I want you to take away from the conversation, it's really to have compassion for yourself first. Thank you, Melissa. This next episode that I find interesting, that I find that could be the highlight of the entire 2024 podcast lineup, was with Ganesha. I think I'm at the right age to look at properties, to start investing in properties. And I think I met the right person at the right time, Ganesha. And in the following few episodes, we had further or deeper conversations about property investments. We even toured KL. We tried to figure out which area would be best in terms of ROI and all this sort of things. But most importantly, Ganesha taught me how picking the right location is the most important part of investing in a property. And before all these, you have to make sure that you have the right capability by finding out if you have the loan eligibility. And of course, he provided equations, formulas to calculate your loan eligibility, basically how likely you are to get a loan from the bank. And in simpler terms, it basically boils down to your income and your expense. In a bigger picture, you could say that's your cash flow, right? That's your income statement. You can think of money in, money out. If you are able to list all these down in an Excel sheet in a very clear way, then I think you've got your finances sorted out really greatly. And that's a great starting point. And of course, like I said, we toured KL, and one of the key takeaway is that we have to understand which side of which area is considered a tier 1 or tier 2 area, because like most people, we don't have excessive capital to buy a property in a tier 1 area. By tier 1 area, I mean areas which are already in a matured location, where there are already skyscrapers, tall office buildings around, and everything is convenient in that area. So mostly we're looking at tier 2 areas for people like me. So why should we invest in tier 2 areas? The reason is simple. Tier 2 areas are expanding to become tier 1 areas in the future. And if you are lucky, or if you are knowledgeable enough, you would eye the right property in the right location, whereby it's in the tier 2 area, but it's already going towards a tier 1 areas level. And that's the best kind of investment that you would want to make. I'm just basically glad I met Ganesha and we talked about all this. I think it's really a great lesson for me. This next episode is one where I think most people who live a sedentary work life would need. I talked to Valerie, Dr. Valerie, a chiropractor based in Cheras, KL, and boy, she said it best when she mentioned we're using our spines every single second, and what makes us think that it's not prone to injury. I think I'm guilty of it right now, if the way I'm sitting. I'm sorry, Dr. Valerie, but I'm trying my best to take care actively of my spine. But for those of you who don't know, depending on our age, I think our spine, our joints are prone to injury, prone to this thing called subluxation, which are basically dislocation of joints due to many reasons. And chiropractic treatments, I think it's one of the active techniques to help get our spine, get our joints back into action, into the right place, in the right location, so that we don't feel pain. That's one, of course, that's the most basic one. And then to obviously continue our lives pain-free, to be able to do things that we like. But of course, the entire conversation surrounded why chiropractic treatment is the best treatment out there for your spine, for your joints, or for your bones. It's definitely one of the options that we can go for. And I think the next best conversation to follow up with is to find out what other active techniques there are to take care of my spine. Let me know down in the comments if you have approached a chiropractor before and what are your experiences with the treatments. As a student in school or in university, have you ever thought of the idea of sitting down with your lecturer and having a conversation with him or her, be it to suggest new ways to teach, or to feedback to the management, or simply to tell them they suck?
Because most of the students, they don't know beyond teacher, they don't know that person's real potential. And if you go deeper into QS ranking, the most important factor that raises the level of any university is
The research.
the research contribution from the academicians. In fact, teaching has become a default now. Nobody damn cares.
But I always have this question, how do you find time for so many papers, so many research in a year? I did. I had the chance to sit down with Dr. Khan, a lecturer from my university. Well, he was kind of the opinion magnet from school. Just so you know, for context here, he's one of the largely popular lecturers in school where people had controversial opinions about him. I think the way he gave his lecture is somewhat two-sided, you would say. Some would agree with him and some would disagree and some would fight with him. But I think the conversation was a fruitful one where students or ex-students like me would have the chance to speak up to him, to tell him what's wrong, to suggest new ways, to suggest solutions to the active problems that he might have turned an eye on. But I'm not saying this is right, actually. We have to understand a bigger picture here where lecturers or giving lecture is just one part of the job. I think there is a discrepancy, between the expectations coming from the students and the expectations coming from the lecturer themselves.
Correct.
Like the lecturers come in, they expect to teach for 1.5 hours, and then the students, they expect to get everything from 1.5 hours, but in fact they have to go home, they have to spend another 3, 4, 5 hours on themselves, reading through the materials and getting through practices and exercises to get to that level.
Definitely.
I think that's the discrepancy there.
Exactly. That's where the problem starts.
And if you already know, and as I would expect, many of you would have known, doing research or writing research papers, I think it's a bigger part of a lecturer's job. I would say after the conversation, it's of no higher priority to lecture or to give lecture to students compared to writing research papers. And after all, universities or institutions hire them just so they can output more research papers in a year that would eventually put them on a higher ranking, if that makes sense. But of course, we can continue on this topic and argue that we as students, we have the responsibility to handle our own homework as long as lecturers are there to guide and help. The point is that sometimes we have to be independent and we cannot fully rely on lecturers. Of course, provided that the lecturers are willing to help when times are necessary. Dr. Khan, thank you for the conversation. I appreciate you and I appreciate the honesty there, and I hope all is well. This next conversation, I had a blast talking to Jared. I think this is one of the conversations where I appreciate the most. We talked about philosophical things, and we had a blast. Basically, because there's no answers to any of this. We talked about really abstract things over here. We talked about morality, objectivity, and moral norms. Say, for example, in certain regions of the world, certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and depending on how we see it, in some other regions in the world, we treat them as good or bad instead of right and wrong. So then the question becomes, are there things that are really right and wrong, or good and bad? What if we think of all these things in a spectrum, meaning it's not a binary version? For example, we talk about rape. In my opinion, that is a wrong thing. There is no spectrum about this, there's no discussion about this. But in some other regions, people would say it occupies a spot, a location along a spectrum, whereby it probably is not wrong, it probably isn't right as well. But we can debate these kind of things all day long. But it's interesting that he offered this kind of insight to how we can view the world.
I personally think that thinking about right and wrong tends to lead us down a fairly problematic path sometimes. I think thinking about what is good versus bad, what is conducive versus not conducive is a better path. And those are close by words, right? But I think rightness and wrongness have boundaries in a way that the other side doesn't. So right and wrong are quite binary, right? At least in the way that many people think about them. Like something is wrong or it's wrong,
okay.
right? It's hard to, we struggle a little bit thinking about wrong but extenuation, so it's not that wrong. But those are hard kind of concepts to kind of draw that line. But good and bad naturally are already a spectrum.
He also gave a comparison to how we can view morality as taste buds, just like we have on our tongue. The example that he gave here is that because morality is like our taste bud, each of them giving a different sensation and different experience, if you combine them all together, I think it would change how we view the world. It's very interesting now thinking back. Again, I don't have any answers, I don't have any conclusions, but I think it's really interesting to stir up this point, just so you can discuss as well with your friends, with your family, what it means to view morality in a spectrum. Does it really occur that way every single time when we talk about certain actions that we do that would probably harm someone? He also brought me back in time and talked about how humans have evolved over the years, and if you so picture this, we as humans have evolved over several millions of years, right? And we used to hunt together, we used to live together, we used to do everything together. We used to eat together, especially after a great hunting session. But now these days, several million years later, we are working individually at our desk, looking at a single computer. We are eating alone more these days. We are, after work, we go back to our own little tiny apartment. And then the question is, are we getting more selfish? But then again, we're actually contributing to a larger objective, a larger goal as a community. Think of companies, right? Think of churches, think of religions. We're coming together as a bigger community these days. So which is right, which is wrong? Are we actually being selfish, more selfish these days? I think, again, there's no answers to all these things. But it strikes a great conversation with Jared. And fun fact, he was with the Ministry of Singapore, and he used to plan all these programs for people to talk about, to strike up conversations that are interesting like this. And if you're watching this, Jared, I thank you for the conversation. It was really interesting and intriguing. I would love to have another conversation with you. For those of you who know, I started working out at a proper gym last February and never looked back since. I think it's really done something different on my fitness level. In this next episode, I talked to Joshua, was my guest, and he's a personal trainer and is obviously jacked. And so I threw him some couple of questions asking how one should approach working out. There are some different cultures in different parts of the world. We talked about the culture of working out, why it's so important to some and why it's not. And of course, it could be due to many different reasons why one would want to work out. It could be due to having confidence in yourself. It could be due to the due to achieving the level of physical fitness that you want, just so you could hike up the mountains with your friends. There are many different reasons, but I think he made a great point when we said people these days are looking for quick solutions. And there's this one-liner that I appreciate a lot, that I like a lot. It goes like this: have patience for results and impatience for actions.
Maybe a lot of times the inertia will center around intimidated by process. And if that's the case, then the idea then would be, this is something I always tell my clients: anything worthwhile getting is worth the wait and the effort. If it was easy, everyone would be walking around ripped as hell, with their lean beach bodies and everything.
Breaking it down, it simply means if you want results, you gotta have patience, you gotta put in the work. And if you're not doing the work, basically have impatience for that. You gotta be impatient when you're not doing something, when you're not working out, when you're not contributing something towards your goal. I like that line a lot, and I have always kept that in my mind. Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate the conversation. I loved it a lot. Have you ever wanted to talk to a flight attendant and wonder what they do in the sky? Well, I had the chance to talk to not one, but two, a female flight attendant and a male flight attendant. Well, for Brenda, the conversation went like this. It was more of how she approached her mental health, her physical health, because of all the time differences that she has had to deal with, sometimes flying out to 16 hours and losing sleep when she needs to. It's really terrible. It's really affecting the physical and mental health as well.
I think that, we're just there to look pretty, we're like a dumb blonde.
I'll put this the other way. Is it hard to maintain a friendship with your existing friends and compare it with how easy it is to meet new friends? Because I assume you're always on the go. I'm talking to a flight attendant, right? What is the toughest thing about flying? I think it's not an easy job but if you like flying, I think it's one of the best feelings in the world, being able to fly 16 hours across the world to somewhere with scenic views. But from her, again, the way she deals with the passengers could be a problem for people who don't like to deal with people. Using her own words, some passengers would think that these flight attendants, more specifically female flight attendants, are basically just dumb blondes hired to look pretty. And to her, managing passengers is a challenge. On the other hand, for Prateep, the male flight attendant that I talked to, the bigger problem was managing the relationships with his colleagues. And to him, the colleagues are the harder part of the flight, not the passengers. Prateep, you were a flight attendant for Singapore Airlines.
If I don't make the jump now, right, I'll just be like here forever. I didn't want that to happen.
What was your most memorable experience flying for SQ?
Any industry, there will be people like that. To me, the harder part was like the colleagues. There's this particular aircraft, like no one really wants to do. It was like I know some friends who take a sleeping pill to help them fall asleep.
It's not your dream job, but it's somehow you start to feel dreadful about the job after some time. So what's a real day in your life? I guess the question is not a day in the life, I guess it's a week in the life. Of course it will miss you. You can't get things done with you or those things that you want to do with you. But on the other side, what about you? Do you ever feel lonely? Prateep, you've worked in this industry for 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Why did you quit? I think it somehow gives me a wider perspective of what the job as a flight attendant looks like. To some, it may be really glamorous, right? You're flying every single week to a new place, probably, and then sometimes I think it's a dream for many, but also a nightmare for those of these flight attendants who have been in the industry for such a long time. dealing with passengers and the colleagues, it's not an easy thing. Again, there's no conclusion here, but I just want you guys to know that these kind of things happen. These kind of things are considered normal in the day-to-day lives. What more can we expect when we're actually here listening to their story? Let's try not to judge. And then in the next episode, I had the chance of my life to talk to Giri, a high school senior of mine, who survived cancer. This special cancer here is called nasopharyngeal cancer, and it's affecting your nose, your mouth, and your throat.
So I was in med school when I was diagnosed with cancer. Cancer.
What's the type of cancer?
So it's called nasopharyngeal cancer. One of them, a senior that I was really close to, actually noticed a lump under my jawline because I never had any bad habits. Somehow I was the one that got it. Think about having the worst sore throat in your life. Like when you cough, when I sneeze, it feels like someone is stabbing the back of my throat with like a knife. It really feels like crap. Yeah, I don't like when people paint cancer survivors as strong. We're really not strong. Like half of us don't know what the hell is going on.
It's been 9 years since. How has your outlook on life changed? And basically, one of the tough treatments that he had to undergo was radiotherapy. And by that, I mean they have to strike a laser or something really, really hard around this area on your face so that they could kill the cancer cells. And the after effect is it's really terrible. When I say something hot or laser, I mean it dries up your saliva so bad that you cannot even swallow, you cannot even eat. And I think for Giri, it was really a challenging time, especially during his early 20s. I can't imagine going through all the treatment that he had gone through. It's unimaginable. But looking on the bright side, he survived cancer, and in his own words, again, most cancer patients don't know what they're going through. They're basically just following the plan from the doctors. But these days, Giri is following is doing his fitness challenge. I think it's already, I don't know, it's 300 or 400 plus days into this challenge. I'm really proud of him. He's doing great. Thank you for the conversation, Giri. Now, this next episode is about two business women. They're apparently partners, and they found each other in a business event. The interesting part of the story was that Shah, one of the two business women that I talked to, had a fallout with her ex-business partners. Aisha, the other businesswoman, is a lawyer, and both of them, I think, complement each other really well together. When I say well, it was mainly because Shah had the fallout, and she learned early on that contracts helped make or break the relationship. So had contracts not appear or not exist in that relationship, everything would fall apart and it would really go down really badly. Aisha, on the other hand, I think she came in really at the right time, talking about contracts and dealing with all these things. And to me, I think the lesson here that I took away was that we need to have the ability to deal with people. We need to have the ability to talk things out, even when things are uncertain or ambiguous. I think for sure contracts are one part of it because it makes things clear, it gives security and safety to all sides, to every party in that relationship on that matter. But again, I think when it comes to resolving conflicts, I think it's only useful if we step up and say how we feel. I think a lot of times, I think people are not willing to talk things out, maybe because it touches on their ego too much and it probably will hurt them in a way. But I think it will hurt more if the conversation doesn't happen. I think this is one of the takeaways from the conversation with Shah and Aisha. It's really great talking about business and, again, handling problems, treating people, resolving conflicts are a major part of this business. On episode 30, we had Shani and Amirul, two dietitians that I talked to. By the way, I had the chance to produce several episodes for them last year. Go check them out. They're the founders of My Fine Diet, and also they have a podcast called Not Only Diet Talk.
Give just an insights on protein intake and why is it matters.
If I break it down, first will be more towards the protein intake of Malaysian.
Really fascinating topics about food, about nutrition, about dieting. Go check them out. So we were talking about this question here, whether we live to eat or we eat to live. I think we have to strike a balance between having fun or enjoying our food and also just eating for the sake of eating, for the sake of our stomach, for the sake of health. There needs to be a balance, I think. But also on the topic of weight loss, we went through this equation or this idea that if we want to achieve successful weight loss, we need to look at two things only, and the two things are calorie intake and calorie loss. So if we want to lose weight, we have to create a calorie deficit, which means your calorie intake must be less than your calorie loss. These two elements are enough to help guide your fitness journey, I would say.
I just live with the concept of like you eat to live or you live to eat.
They practice keto diet and they drink
Protein shakes.
oil.
Keto diet is mainly designed for children with epilepsy. Yes.
Shen Yi and Amirul, two young dietitians who hope to bring the knowledge of healthy diets to the masses. First, by making sure we understand the definition of healthy. We can then control and track what we eat.
For people with diabetes, they need to avoid simple carbohydrate, but they can still take complex carbohydrate.
We take extremely low carbohydrate and we replace it with high fat. In my definition, I wouldn't say it's a healthy way of diet.
What about fasting?
But the only condition is that you need to take it consistently at least. But it really helps. And most importantly, it's actually tracking, especially when it comes to your food intake. You know, like when you have data, it's easy for you to analyze.
What about your diet then? Is it that healthy?
What do you think is the diet of a dietitian?
But it was a fun episode talking about dieting, talking about keto, talking about whether I'm really eating the right food. I even gave them the entire recipe of what I'm eating in a day. To them, I think it's a healthy one. I vividly remember Amirul saying that I probably am lacking vegetables in my diet. I still remember you, Amirul. I'm eating more greens these days. And if you are looking for some nutrition tips, make sure to check them out. After all these conversations, I haven't had the chance to talk to a tech startup founder until this episode 35. So Stephen founded his company, a tech company called Firejet. Basically what it does, or its main product, is a solution where it would convert your Figma designs into code. It's mainly for developers or web developers specifically.
We were all engineers, so we had no concept of like how to run a business. So we were all like, oh, we're gonna build and build and build.
Stephen and his co-founder founded Firejet, which is based around a company bought by Adobe for $20 billion called Figma.
The difference between Firejet versus the other ideas is that Firejet actually had our first paying user. Okay, this time we're going to make sure someone is going to pay for it. There's two ways: either you build a product that people will pay for from the get-go, or build a product that has a lot of users. Because the second part of building a company is hire good talent. You can't have someone who's like, come here to, oh, I want to learn. The top reasons for a startup to fail is usually the way we build features is we don't expect to build anything. I would say this is how we do it. Don't build things people don't need, build things people ask for.
What is the one metric that you use to measure your growth?
Retention. So retention is defined as the number of people staying past the first billing cycle.
Well, you seem to be very familiar with all these numbers and you seem to be very confident of your product, your tool. What do you think is the reason you guys were not accepted at once?
The problem is,
I think the interesting part in this conversation or in this story is that he said it best, and I can fully resonate with him. He didn't want to work for anybody, and that's why he started his company. But we went further and talked about how he tried to apply it to one of the world's largest accelerator Y Combinator. I had to ask this question, how he did it, and what sort of preparation he needs to do. What about his partner? What are the pitch deck that he showed to the interviewers? I had to ask these questions. But of course, he fell short of entering into Y Combinator. It's fine, I think, but it gave him a clearer picture of how to position his product and company. I think it came at the right time when he was really struggling with getting customers or trying to put his product into the spotlight. And again, I always get reminded, because of all these conversations, that when we talk to people, it's always easy to generate ideas, to come up with something new, probably related to your strategy, your company strategy, or something that you're currently doing. It always gives me the satisfaction that I'm helping, or either I'm being helped by someone. And I appreciate all these conversations a lot. And trust me, going into the last few episodes of last year, I think we talked more about problems, we talked more about solutions, we talked more about the things that we ultimately care about. This next episode is about sea gypsies. This volunteer, or this guest that I spoke to, he's called Zul. He's one of the volunteers that would actively go to Sabah, specifically this remote island called Sempurna. And there he saw many challenging things. For one, sea gypsies are basically people who live from boat to boat, sometimes visiting land for trading activities. The main problem is poverty. I think poverty strikes when these people are reluctant to education, they're reluctant to change. Again, we've heard this before, change is inevitable and we need to embrace it every single day. And I think particularly for sea gypsies, it's not clear to them how change is going to bring benefit to them. Of course, there are some kids who manage to receive education elsewhere, and when they come back, they would say, I want to bring change to my family in a better way.
It came to a point that they had parents who just left the kids behind and went off. Yeah. So it's not like I want to register my kid here. It's just that you stay here, don't come back. In Sempurna Island, the mainland, the current rampant trend among the people is glue sniffing. When you go there, you will be able to see the rawness of how people are actually lying down on the slum, sniffing glue and all. If it doesn't scare you, you will even see kids as young as 4 years old doing so. So when they followed back to his house, what they saw was the food packet that he put there. His two siblings were eating. And he said, I get food, but they should eat. I can take this and not feel hungry, it's fine. But I want them to eat. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, shoot. So I asked around, so why are you guys just here? Why are the kids just here? Why can't they do something else? Oh, because they don't have an IC, they are not registered, they are not recognized. Yeah, so I'm like, I see. So that was when I decided, nope, I think I'm going to plant myself here and start helping them out. So we have set up a 10 years plan for these kids. So the 10 years plan includes
But I think when Zul told me this little observation during his visit to Sempurna, kids are sniffing on glue just to not feel hungry. And I got goosebumps because of that. I think that the problem is more serious. I think the problem's on a more serious note when kids are the ones suffering. See, the thing is, people are giving, or they are contributing to this group of people already. They're giving help, they're donating food, they're donating clothes, they're donating everything to them. But Zul has his own plan, a 10-year plan to help transform this group of people. And I think he said it best, that education has to be first. He needs these people to understand that change is coming, and they have to welcome change in order to have a better life. For those of you out there who's volunteering or who would like to try, Zul is the best contact here. Let me know if you want to give this a try. It's really heartbreaking sometimes if you listen to the conversation. Now we're near to the end of the last conversation. This episode 38, I had this conversation with Mason, a founder of a company called OPEC. So what OPEC specializes in is in the footwear, specifically reusable footwear business.
I don't want return how? In Malaysia, only 9% of plastic get recycled. So when the drink itself actually blends with the biodegradable packagings, it make it not pure. So when it's not pure, it make the recycle process hard.
Okay.
So that's the reasons what make recycling rate become so low in Malaysia. OPEC is doing like a rent and return footwear businesses for company like corporate events and some government event to reduce the single-use plastic waste. So that's the reasons why we would choose PP5 as our reusable plastic packagings when we launch our own footwear. One is just like, make, use, throw. One is like reduce, reuse and recycle. Yeah.
This is one question. I was wondering, how do you measure your success?
So if our rent rate is high, which means that we have already reduced how much of single-use plastic go into the landfills.
From Mason herself, she doesn't believe biodegradables are the solution, simply because in some biodegradable products, plastic linings are found, and if you know plastic linings or plastic basically, they're not recyclable and it makes the whole product useless, unrecyclable. And she came up with this idea of reusable footwear. I was skeptical at first because I was thinking, if you had to introduce another plastic into the economy, doesn't that actually bring the problem to a worse situation? But after the conversation, I know from her that she's trying to replace all the non-reusable plastics. Simply by taking rental rate, you can already calculate how much single-use plastics are avoided. And one of the examples that she gave was with large corporations who still prefer single-use plastics because of the problem with logistics. For example, how you need to transport all these reusable plastics back to the vendor, or how you need to deal with all these things. Single-use plastics are the most convenient because you can just throw them away. But I think from Mason's perspective, I think it makes sense because she's trying to replace all these single-use plastics in the economy by introducing reusable plastics. I think it's interesting to strike a problem at this angle, at this direction, or in this approach. Again, I'm loving all these conversations because it brings new ideas, it generates really cool perspectives that I've never seen before. And I hope you guys get the chance to put your share in as well, of ideas, of comments, of perspectives. Now, we're near to the end, or the last conversation here is with Farah, a surgical nurse based in KL. I can still vividly remember this last conversation because of Above the Attitude. She really is an extrovert, and the way she handles her patients, she's treating them like her own babies, What does a surgical nurse do?
I've been following my mother to her healthcare unit.
She was a nurse as well?
She's a nursing officer, a senior nursing officer currently. She's a chairman of the board of nursing director.
Is there something that you've seen before in the ward, but you've never talked about?
Okay, enterostoma is if the patient having a colon problem, and then we gotta take out all the colon, so no colon at all, no small intestine, no large intestine. So where is the feces gonna disperse out? They think we just wiping someone's buttock and all that. No, we are beyond that.
I'm not sure if this will actually build up stress because of all the emotions that you've bottled up throughout, let's say, your morning shift, and let's say after 2 p.m. and you would break down. Does that happen often?
Yeah. Especially when a death happened. I have a lot of crying this year because it's really... Life is just a phase. Yeah. You have to, if you are not changing it, you are choosing it.
And for a nurse to offer kindness to a total stranger without first having to understand them, their background, their life, the family and the friends and everything about them, I think it's really amazing to me.
There's a lot of... I'm crying. I'm crying because it's really exhausting.
In that conversation, she explained to me what she needs to do in her day-to-day life, and boy, there's a ton of things that she needs to handle. From 11 patients per nurse to handling all the doses, all the medicines, prescriptions from the doctor. They need to be able to confirm, they need to be able to check and make sure that there is no mistake in any of these things, in any of these procedures. And I think the workload is just so high that work-life balance, as she said it, is non-existent. We need to pay more attention to the healthcare industry in Malaysia. I think after listening to her story, it's safe to say that nurses, I can't say nurses, they are not on the same level as doctors. In a way, I think in the job description they are not on the same level, but I think the workload, they're almost identical. And I think I appreciate Farah a lot when she describes how she would treat her patients. It just reminds me of how in times of difficulty, all we need is some kindness. I think we need to look into the healthcare industry. She said it best, that there is no work-life balance, the wage is low, people are leaving Malaysia to some other countries with better benefits, with better compensation. Sure, I mean, we can still resist judgments at this point. We don't have to make conclusions, but I think it makes a point to raise this concern to anyone who's listening. Thank you, Farah. So there you go. This is the recap of some of the highlights, some of the important conversations that I think I would want to listen back to again or have some follow-up conversations. But again, 41 episodes last year, I cannot really believe that we've made this many episodes, this many conversations. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in at some point in last year. And after all that, I think there are a couple lessons that I wanted to mention. First of all is the ability to pay attention to details. I think after a year of editing, a year of having conversations, I've come to learn that paying attention to details is utmost important. You know, I, for one, am not the kind of person who would like to pay attention to details at all. But I've come to learn that when you need to convey the right message, when you need people to listen to you, you need to be able to focus on the small things. For example, when editing, it takes hours, right? And only by paying attention to the details, the captions, the wording, the lighting, the audio, can people notice the exact message that you want to bring across. So if you notice in my videos, I can't control the lighting yet, but I can control the audio in post-processing. I can control the captions, I can control what people need to see. But again, this leads to my next point. But before that, I think paying attention to details is something I picked up along the way. It's something I'm gonna focus more on this year. And in the second part, or the second lesson that I take away from all this is the idea of resisting judgments. Sure, the trailers, the videos that I make, they all are part of what I want people to see. But I've always believed that if the stories are neutral, they can bring a better effect. They can bring a better impact to listeners. I mean, sure, I'm guilty of this as well. When listening to stories, when talking to people, when talking to my guests, I would have conclusions already made up in my mind. I would have some sort of judgments already. And I don't think it's good, because it can actually bring a story from point A to point B, and it totally changes the whole landscape and even the perspective of the storyteller. I don't think it's a good approach, and therefore I came up with this catchphrase for the Decode Diary. During conversations, I try to resist judgments. I try to resist any sort of conclusions until the story is fully told. I just can't imagine the impact that it would bring to the listeners and to the storyteller themselves if during the conversation, if during the story, certain judgments are made, certain conclusions are made. It simply brings the conversation to a stop. and I would try to not do that in any of the conversation that follows. So, what's next for 2025? 2024 has been great. I can't fathom how we actually had 41 conversations last year, but this year we have some interesting lineups. I'm not going to review just yet, but make sure to stay tuned. We're on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, IG. You heard that right, we're on YouTube starting this episode. If you're watching this, I mean, we're already in March, but yes, I'm going to make this a challenge to upload on YouTube. We've been testing this for the whole part of last year, so make sure to subscribe, like and comment on YouTube. I'm going to show you what goes on behind each conversation. Yeah. So until the next conversation, resist your judgments, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.